Hey everybody, it's Joe Bergamini here coming to you once again. It's Friday, and you know what that means. On Friday, I have the distinct pleasure every Friday of hosting
Mhm.
a world-class drummer and guest, and have this wonderful opportunity to get to be able to uh, get to know and interview some drummers I know very well, some drummers I don't know so well. But welcome back. Today's a really special day. Um, a drummer who I just actually met yesterday and found to be a
Mhm.
wonderful gentleman, but of course have known about his playing for a long time. He hails from St. Louis, came up playing in church, came to New York to study, and quickly became one of the top players on the scene here in New York, and began playing with Cassandra Wilson, and then later with Kenny Garrett, and then of course he replaced the great Will Kennedy in the Yellowjackets, with whom he stayed for a little over, I believe, over a decade. Is that right? Uh,
Yep.
and
Mhm.
and then went to left that group and has now a duo, the Baylor Project, with his lovely wife, and they are Grammy nominated. They have huge social media following, and he's involved with not only the playing but also the full production and direction of that act. And we have tons and tons to talk about today, and I'm thrilled to have Sabian artist and one of the greatest drummers on the planet, and as I said, a true gentleman who we spoke for quite a while yesterday, Mr. Marcus Baylor. Welcome, Marcus.
Man, thank you so much, Joe, for having me. First of all, that introduction was just, man, I actually paid you for that.
We'll get back to that later.
Yeah.
Uh, but thank you for doing this, and I really appreciate it. So today I want to kind of get into a lot of different things,
Mhm.
including most of what you're doing right now. But let's kind of go back and just start from the beginning. You know, Sabian Education Network that I run, I always like to talk about beginnings and, of course, mentors and educators. And I know in St. Louis you came up playing in church. So um, I guess you'd say that sort of was formed your early musical values. Um,
Yes. I mean, I started playing drums at the age of 2 in my dad's church in St. Louis, Missouri. My dad was a pastor, so I grew up in a Pentecostal background, apostolic background, and so it was a lot of the music was really energetic and just full of spirit, and so that's where I started. And I was the church drummer at 5 years old.
oh, five,
Yeah,
prodigy.
5 years old.
Um, One thing I wondered was I got to know, through Hudson Music and some other projects, some of the guys from like the Philly scene and
Yeah.
DC, Aaron Spears and those guys and
Hmm.
Spanky, and they had the scene where it was like very competitive, friendly competition with sheds and drummers from different. Was it? Did you know a lot of drummers at that time that you kind of traded ideas with, or were you more in,
Hmm.
you know?
Well, that was a different time. So when I came along, I came along more like the 80s. I was born in the 70s, so the 80s and then like early 90s. So basically, I think the sheds actually, I could be wrong at this, but the first shed that I ever saw was when I was in college. I never knew anything about it. It was Chris Dave and a great drummer named Mark Simmons and another drummer named Jeremy Gaddy, which was more of a Houston crew. That was the first time I ever seen a shed, and I had it on VHS. And um but we didn't really grow up like our sheds. I mean, we would have jam sessions, but I didn't grow up doing the shed scene. I think the shed scene became more popular once social media came along.
Wow.
So
Okay.
that's what I think the whole shedding, the gospel chops, and those things came along because I never had a chance to. We would jam, but it was never like 2 or 3 drum sets.
Yeah.
But I remember one shed I remember doing, but we were brothers. It ain't like being competitive or none of that. It was,
Mhm.
I remember me, Chris, Dave, and Gerald Hayward.
Oh,
So it's like, we just went to church and Gerald had 2 drum set up and we just hung out.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. So at 5 years old, when you were that young, I mean, did you have like, were there famous drummers that you liked, or was it mainly somebody that you watched playing in church that was older than you, or
Yeah.
your?
It was a few people. Well, it started with my cousin who was the church drummer. And so he was the first drummer that I had a chance to really watch and see playing. And the other, and I guess the other influences where I grew up on gospel music. So I was a huge there's a gospel group called Commission, where a really known artist come out of there named Fred Hammond. And so my biggest musical influence in life and everything, because their influences go from 80s rock to gospel to jazz influences. You'll hear the group Toto with the influences in Commission, and then you have these harmonies. But inside of Commission, they were a band. So the lead singer played bass. You had a drummer by the name of Michael Williams, which was like my biggest inspiration. So, I mean, you have to check out this band. I mean, the way they engineered their records, the sound sonically. So they were really a trailblazing group in gospel music. And then you had another group called the Winans, where there was a drummer named Dana Davis that played on that toured with them. So those were my two biggest influences. And then, of course, other gospel artists, a group called the Hawkins Family. And so all that was a major part of my musical upbringing. And then last not least, but Bill Maxwell recorded a lot on Andre Crouch records and played on the early Winans records. So, and he went on to produce and do a lot of different things with, you know, artists and stuff like that. Yeah.
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 Well, I mean, when I first became aware of your jazz playing, of course, so which is just amazing. And when did you get your first early exposure to, you know, to jazz and bebop and post bop and all that stuff?
Oh, wow. Well, my first influence to jazz music was through a friend of mine. Actually, the first time I heard jazz is when I hung out with a friend of mine named Chris Collier in St. Louis, Missouri. He's a pastor now, but we were bros. He introduced me to the Yellowjackets. First time I ever heard that music.
No way. Really? You were listening to it?
Yeah, I think I was maybe like in 8th or 9th grade or something like that. And he had a Yellowjackets record. So I was able to, you know, hang out with him. So that was my first early influence of jazz. And then once the straight ahead happened, the straight ahead thing came from, I grew up, like I said, in church, strict Pentecostal background. No other music was allowed in the house. And so I remember, I don't know why my parents did this, but I had a door in my bedroom to go outside. So my first, I had a friend of mine named Danny Campbell, who's an amazing trumpet player in St. Louis, Missouri. He took me to my first, I think I went to my first jazz club with him. I snuck out and went to my first jazz club, and I remember hearing the swing and the energy. And I was just like, wow, what is this? And from then on, I was hooked. And then there's a mentor that I met at the time named Richard Henderson, who just passed away last year. He's like it's like my godfather. And he was really instrumental in connecting musicians with Wynton Marsalis and everybody that came in, you know, that toured, that came through St. Louis. And so he would make tapes, make records. You know, I would go sit at his house at like, you're talking about a 70, 60-year-old man but he would be up to like 5 a.m. So whenever I would go to Richard's house, it would have to be 10 o'clock because he was on New York hours. And so, man, he was really a mentor to so many of us. And he really introduced me to the music as well.
And how old were you at that point?
That was probably around my sophomore year or something like that of high school.
Okay.
Yeah, more like high school, you know, and then during that time, I remember Tom Kennedy that plays bass in Dave Weckel's band. He was teaching at a university called Southern Illinois University. And so the fast forward, I ended up winning I won a solo award jazz competition. And so I was able to get a scholarship to their jazz camp. And then from there, my senior year of high school, it's crazy. I was a part of the jazz combo. So I got college credit. So I took private lessons with Tom Kennedy. And I remember the first time I met Tom Kennedy, I said, hey, I want to take private lessons with you, but I want to learn how to sound like Dave Weckel. And he said, man, this is what you need to do. He understood that I needed to get my foundation together to understand tunes, to understand, you know, structure of straight ahead. And he told me, he's like, man, you need to get you some Jimmy Cobb records. And man, we would sit and play duo and he would play acoustic. And man, that really was the beginning of, you know, that was a major part of the journey. And then, of course, I can't leave out other mentors, Charles Payne, who I studied with in St. Louis, and Kevin Janino, just great musicians that really invested in me as far as their knowledge of the music and just playing and getting into music reading and getting
Uh-huh.
introduced to that. And I was in school band and everything. I did marching band. I did those things too.
And did you have like a drum teacher, like official at that young age too?
Yeah, like so my first drum teacher probably came around, I say maybe eighth, maybe like seventh or eighth grade, yeah, like seventh or eighth grade.
Uh-huh.
And that was Mr. Charles Payne was first.
Okay. Okay.
He was first, and he was doing gigs around the city, and he taught in school, and then after that, there was a teacher by the name of Kevin Janino. Yeah,
And
and then Tom Kennedy came later after that.
and those two gentlemen, were they like turning you on to like jazz greats too? Were they saying, "Hey, check out Art
Ye-
Blakey," or not really? Like,
Yeah, they were more so a part of introducing me to music reading,
I see, I see.
and as a whole, they was more into music reading. Then I had buddies that would turn me on the records, and there was a jazz club in St. Louis called the Hotel Majestic, in which is called Just Jazz, and then it moved to Jazz at the Bistro now, and which artists would come in, and then I would go to their happy hour. Get my buddy and I would get free hot wings, and be able to watch a lot of the great local musicians in St. Louis, and just know through all this is all me sneaking out the house.
Yeah, I was going to
I
ask
had
you.
no idea.
You said like that. You had this strict upbringing. This other music wasn't allowed. So I was wondering if your parents, like, when they realized you love jazz and you wanted to pursue this, how did that open up? Did they accept it, or?
Well, the way I sort of brought it in at the beginning was uh through education. It was through school because I was in jazz band at school. And so it was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go to college for music. And so I'm the last I have 7 brothers and 2 sisters. I'm the quote unquote the baby of the family. And so with that, college wasn't an option in our household. So, music was my outlet, was my way to express myself, to tell my parents, hey, yeah, I'm gonna go to school for music. I mean, I was a basketball fanatic, but my NBA dreams ended. I'm 5'4.5". Not that I couldn't have made it to the NBA, but music was my passion. And so with that, my family was really, I think the main thing was that a lot of it was like what is it? It was like a stereotype of the musician's life.
Uh,
Like, everything is about, you hanging out in clubs, you having drinking problems, drugs, and that's not the case. I mean, I'm a Christian person, I love God, and I also love Miles Davis. And I think it's based off someone seeing an example of your lifestyle.
yeah,
And I think at the end of the day, like meeting somebody like yourself, a great family man. And I think those examples and stereotypes was totally different from what they saw from growing up. My parents is from Mississippi.
uh,
So when you think of the club, when you think of the blues, when you think of, it was just different time period. Not that those things don't exist, even in today's time, but I was really blessed to have mentors to steer me in the right direction and say, hey, you see these kind of people on the scene. No, you need to navigate over here.
I see.
So yeah, so I was really blessed.
And it sounds like eventually your folks realized it was your dream and they were on board, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and now they're real supportive. And then not to say this, not to tell you I wasn't not to knock anybody, not that I wasn't a teenager that
Yeah,
explored. I mean, hey, at one time I can say this. At one time I was that person that had the marijuana underneath the bed.
I see.
That was, I drinking I had that part of time in my life.
Mhm, mhm.
And it's part of finding yourself. And I just really feel blessed that I could be an example for others. God has blessed me, hopefully, to be an example for others to say, hey, I'm not necessarily pointing a finger at you, but just knowing that, there are certain habits that you have to be careful of, that you want to make sure that, that you create habits that you can set up a successful life. And you have to make a decision as a musician, not just as a musician, as a human being. What kind of life do you want? What kind of legacy do you want to live?
Yeah.
you know. And so for me, that wasn't the legacy that I want to leave for myself or even represent my, you know, my family.
Yeah. That's great. Just what you said so far is just such a testament to the power of the mentor and the teacher.
Yeah.
You on the right path. And we all experiment and do crazy stuff when we're
Mm.
kids. But, you know, I don't know about you, Marcus, but like most of my musician friends, like talking to you, like, you know, eat healthy and like
Yeah.
take care of themselves more than most of the other people I know. You
I mean,
know,
you
that's
know, yeah, I mean, I think it's about, you know, I'm going live on Instagram too. So if
oh,
you're
yeah, we can talk about that too. Yeah,
what's happening is that I feel like one of the things I feel like is that being a touring musician, um, you start realizing that okay, so I'm turning 44 October 10th. Um, so this is the thing when you get out here on the road, like I worked out this morning. Like one of the things is that the key to really being able to sustain yourself on the road is creating a regimen of eating healthy. And for me, and exercising, especially being a drummer, because you know what it feels like that third night you on the road and you had a 3 a.m. lobby call. And it's like, man, you get there, you got 2 flights, and then you got to go to sound check. The only thing that can keep me is two things: eating a certain way, rest, and exercise.
yeah, yeah,
Because this traveling thing, this road life really takes a toll on you because you need to be, you know, you just need to be alert. You need, not that you're not tired, but it's just being for the long haul. If you're planning on having a long career, you know,
yeah.
longevity and everything.
I've heard it said, and it's true. We are small muscle athletes on the
Yeah.
drum, and
Yeah.
you know, you need your body to work. You need your
Yeah.
limbs to work, and so that's great advice.
Yeah.
So let's let's jump to New York City. Came
Yes.
here to go to school, and what was the vibe and the scene like when you were here, and how did you got to be known as one of the best players around town on the circuit, and
Um,
so you came from the new school, right?
yeah, came from the new school. Oh wow, I just figured out on the page how to bring up the comments. Okay.
Oh, you
And
see that?
yeah,
Yeah,
now I see that. Hey everybody, pleasure to meet you all. But let
lots of
me
our
ask,
and
yes. Wow, I see a buddy I went to school with. Wow,
yeah,
keep
we're Bobby. He's got his question here for you, which is what I was getting at about the new school.
But you asked me what was yeah, ask me the question again.
Well,
Go
so I was just saying. So now, take us to New York City
ahead.
and studies there. What you took away from it, and then you know you kind of hit the ground running with your career in New York, right after school was over.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, one thing I want to encourage somebody, as much as I said, hey, I might have won this competition or, you know, won this competition or that competition, it wasn't what people think. There's still, although I was blessed to have the gift to play music, there was still a lot of time and practice that had to be put into the craft. I didn't grow up. Now, musically, the groove and the sound of jazz music and all these influences were naturally there. But that doesn't mean that I didn't have to learn the language. So moving to New York and going to the new school really taught me the language. Like for instance, I grew up playing a lot of groove, backbeat. So with that being said, when I moved to New York, I didn't start gigging right away. For 2 years, I will go down to Smalls Jazz Club. I will go down and watch drummers like Ollie Jackson, Eric Harlan. I seen off the top of my head, Joe Farnsworth, and then all the legends, all the greats as well at the clubs. I would just watch. I had a long way to go.
Mm.
I mean, it was, you know, I really had to understand what the sound of the music was. I had to understand, even like this kit that's sitting behind me, if you can see it, but it's my first
Yeah, let me make you bigger.
quote unquote bebop kit. It's an old Rogers kit, which I got from a great drummer, amazing drummer, my big bro Gregory Hutcherson.
Oh yeah,
And so even just understanding the sound, the right cymbals, of course, you know, and I think it, you know, the new school was, for me, it was more of a straight ahead jazz school, but that's what I needed. Like nothing. I love Berkeley School of Music. I love all those institutions, but I know if I would have went to Berkeley or a school like that, I would have gravitated towards my comfort zone, which would have probably been more like, okay, gospel and, you know, and probably doing, you know, playing more R&B. and I probably would have strayed away from the straight ahead possibly just because that was but the new school was strictly Spain, Spangalang, Spangalang. And that's where I, study with Michael Carvin, Buster Williams, like one of my college colleague, Bobby, man, wow. Yeah, Chico Hamilton, like, rhythm analysis, which I was horrible at. But because I didn't go to performing arts high school. So that was the first time I was introduced to ear training,
Wow.
transcribing. It kicked my behind. Like to be a drummer in class with piano players and horn players. It was just like, but it was an amazing experience. I mean, that's where a lot of friendships cultivated. Like the saxophonist in our band, Keith Loftus, went to the new school. My big bro that actually got me to move to New York was Cedric Mitchell. He's MD for Maxwell, to Whitney Houston, Kenny Garrett, Christian McBride, Robert Glasper and I, we were at school together. He played my senior recital. The Strickland brothers, Marcus and EJ Strickland. I mean, there's a long list of just great, amazing musicians, and we all had a bond in which we all hung out, and it was family around there. Yeah.
It sounds like you developed in that environment. You were able to thrive and develop new parts of your voice, and then start kind of working right as you were getting out of school, right? Like I know you said you listened for a while, but
to speed that up. So basically, for 2 years, I was really just checking out the music and studying, and I was playing at church, doing church gigs. But the thing about it is that I loved. So this is how it happened for me. What I loved was I started doing gigs in New York City, but see, for me, I don't see music as genres. I hear a sound and it automatically says, okay, man, I attach myself to the sound. So I was doing nothing but straight ahead gigs in New York. But then I was doing blues gigs with a guitarist named Bobby Bell at
Manny's Car Wash?
No, it was at Vigiones used to be down the street. It turned into another, man, the Groove. No, not the Groove. The Grove is over right across the street from like Smalls, that area. I remember can't remember the name of it. Terra's Blues, like all those clubs in the village.
Yeah.
So I would go from doing a straight up R&B blues gig to a straight ahead gig, and then I would play at church. But right. This is, and it's funny because even in jazz music, there are certain time periods that people focus on. So like I would play with my bros that were, into the modern, but then I would go to Smalls, which was Wednesday night at the time, which was strictly hard bebop. So I associated myself with everybody, and I'm still that way today. Like so to speed it up. So my junior year of college is when I really started gigging a lot.
Okay.
And one thing I want to tell young musicians, or just musicians in general, we spoke about this yesterday about preparation. Like your opportunity is going to come, but the main thing is that a bro of mine, Jeremy Gaddy, said, to pray to be prepared once the opportunity comes. Like, yes, did I sit in at Smalls early on? Yes, like maybe 1 or 2 times I was nervous because you got cats in the club and you're like, man, this is my opportunity. That whole anxiety thing. But I started doing gigs, in college, my junior year. And so a lot of those gigs were $50 gigs, $30 gigs, on a local scene. And they range from different, making, I just wanted to play.
Yeah.
And so a special shout out to a bro named Eric Wyatt. A lot of us came through playing with him, which was Terrion Gully, Mark Collenberg, Ollie Jackson. I mean, I could name Emmanuel Harrell with Greg Report. I can name a whole list of drummers that played with Eric Wyatt and hitting with him till this day. So it was one of those things where once you get on the scene and you start playing a lot, your name start getting out here. And people start saying, hey, check out this young drummer. So the turning point that was in my career, I felt, was I had an ensemble that Buster Williams was over the ensemble at the new school, and we were asked to play IAJE. I don't know if I really ever shared this story. IAJE, which is International Association of Jazz Educators Conference, which is now GEN, which is high schools, colleges, education.
Yes, and for those who don't know, it's a big thing in New York City. Like people
Yeah,
come all over the place.
yeah. So they were moving around. And so it was in New York for a while, but the GN now happens all over.
Right, right.
And so what ended up happening is it was at the one in Chicago.
Oh.
And I remember playing, actually it's crazy because I remember seeing the night before it was Jeff Tane Watts, and he was playing with Michael Brecker. And up until that time, I never really understood. Tane is unbelievable, my big bro. And for the first time, I understood somewhat conceptually what was happening. And that changed the way I played. I heard straight ahead music. It changed everything. He's a major influence on me. So that next night, our ensemble played. It was a huge concert, packed out. And actually in the crowd was Ndugo Chancellor, Robert Glasper was a senior in high school. Mark Kelly that plays bass with the Roots, Kendrick Scott. They were all, because they all went to high school together, and they were all hanging out together. Walter Smith, all the whole crew. And man, that night, I don't know what happened. From that inspiration, it was a thing, a magical moment that happened for my life. After that, people heard me, and that led to me doing a lot of different gigs in New York City. Wow. And just though, and this is the thing, when that moment started happening in your life, rather than saying, "Hey, what's next? What's next?" Embrace that moment, because that moment only happens one time. When you start getting in, when your name start getting out here, and you get invited to your first audition, and people are excited about this newcomer drummer or musician, whatever instrument you play. Yeah, that's a moment that I will never forget. And so out of that, I did a gig in Central Park, another just random gig. And the bass player was named Lonnie Plaxico. And, he came, he rehearsed at my house. I don't know, we rehearsed at my house, I think, or rehearsed somewhere. And then we did the gig. I can't remember the saxophonist's name, but I did that one gig with the saxophonist and never seen him ever again. So this is how moments happen. Out of that gig, Lonnie said, "Hey man, I'm a music director or whatever for Cassandra Wilson." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool. She's going to be auditioning musicians and drummers. Would you like, I'll give you a call if you want to, to come audition." I'm like, "Yeah, cool." Now, but this is what's going to get you. I had no idea who Cassandra Wilson was. Cassandra, I love you. If it wasn't, I'm here. You're a major part of my life, and just taking a risk on me, being able to record with you. But I didn't know who Cassandra Wilson was. So what happened is I show up to the audition at her house, and there were a couple other drummers there, amazing musicians. And that's what I want to tell you. When you show up to an audition, it's not necessarily about you that you're better than the next drummer or the next man. Really, I believe there's a gig out here for everybody. And when I say that, that means that your sound just fits that situation. Because I can't sit up here and tell you, "Hey, I'm better than anybody else." I didn't even know Cassandra Wilson's music. So how could I sit up here and say I'm better than the next man, this and that? And some of the drummers that are there are some of the most prominent guys. I mean, they unbelievable. So it ain't to toot my horn and say, "Oh man," no. Amazing musicians. So I was blessed to get the gig. But I still didn't know who she, I went and bought her, I got her records. And that's another thing. I didn't wait for Cassandra Wilson to say, "Hey, Marcus, here are my records." No, back then, if you wanted a gig, and even now, go buy the music. And it's even easier now because you can stream it. But I went out and bought those records.
Before the audition?
After the audition, because I didn't know. I should have bought it before the audition, so I can really know what I was playing and what I was dealing with, in terms of musically. But I was blessed to get the gig, and I still didn't know, the magnitude of how big she was until we got on the tour bus. And I was like, wow, I'm a junior in the college. And I'm like, what? Yeah. And we played, and then we show up and play this gig at Princeton Theater. Huge. I'm used to playing clubs, small clubs or cafes, where the bartender telling you, "Hey man, I need you all to bring the sound, bring it down. You're a little too loud." I was used to that. Man, I show up and I'm like, wow, she's huge. Like, and that's from there. That's, that was the start of uh, me touring internationally and quote unquote. I mean, I'm gonna use a marketing term because with my own record label and everything, that was the beginning of quote unquote brand.
Right. Oh,
Started of who I am, and out of that, I know I'm saying a lot. You might have a few more questions, but
there's 1,000 things I want to say and ask you right now.
yeah,
Just say this one. First of all, that thing you said about getting the music and getting to know that, like, that's been common with everyone I've interviewed, and like your story of just like being who you are, and like people are going to hear you
yeah,
and they heard you, but like and I have a question about that, but what I'm thinking of right now is this, like, so you say you didn't really know the height or the breadth of Cassandra's music and her career.
yeah,
Like, then maybe let's say going to audition or to get the gig with the Yellowjackets, where you told me that you heard them when you were a kid, so you clearly did know who they were.
yeah.
Like, if you do you think your naivety to not knowing who she was made you play better rather than the pressure of the anxiety, or no difference? And how do you handle that?
I think that was perfect timing because I was pretty studious about who I was playing with because I have a model in my mind. Just tell my wife and interview now. So she texted me. But any case, but I have a motto. This is my motto. When I jump into a situation, I listen to the music so that I never think to myself, how can I insert markers? So I'm gonna answer that question. How can I insert marker style? I always want to make an artist feel like they've been playing with me for years. And how do I do that? I go back and study their tapes. I study their live performances. I study their records. Over time, markers will be inserted.
Mm.
But you got to learn the part of whatever that music is first. So to answer your question, I think that particular situation worked out for me because it was the beginning of now everybody is so versatile. But when I came in the 90s, straight ahead drummers mostly, not that they couldn't do it, but the way the mindset of the integration of straight ahead swing into backbeat. Like Cassandra Wilson has a serious blues influence, but at the same time you hear R&B. But then, so this what I had to do. I had to ask them. I said, "Hey," I asked the music director, "Man, or Cassandra, what music does Cassandra listen to?" See, that's important. Who are her influences? Because I need to know where she's coming out of. So that forced me for the first time to go buy a Joni Mitchell record.
Oh, wow.
So she's was influenced by Joni Mitchell and different people, blues artists like Robert, man, why is it slipping my mind? But legendary blues artists.
Robert Johnson, you say?
Yes, Robert Johnson. And that's the first time I ever heard slide guitar with Marvin Sewell. So all these things are a major part of me today. And so I say that to say, how I believe I got that gig was because of the versatility.
Oh, okay.
I didn't live in one space. And during that time, you didn't have a lot of drummers necessarily. Most drummers were like, okay, I'm straight ahead. Not that they couldn't play other music. I'm not saying that. But it was like, okay, they were known for, okay, swing. They were known for. So my generation was really like the merger of, to me, I mean, I could be wrong, but the merger of backbeat hip hop and merging that and bringing that into the music. And I feel like one of the major innovators I got to give props to was a Chris Dave. Like, I didn't think about hip hop drumming, quote unquote, influenced by the culture, but because people never wrote with hip hop drumming in mind. And Chris Dave was an innovative with that, with Kenny Garrett. So to just bridge all of it, Cassandra was an innovator. And I just feel like I was a person that was able to go those different directions on what she was looking for. Now, mind you, I can't take the credit because the drummer that was before me, you had Terry Lynn Carrington. Again, an innovator. Terry plays everything. She was on Arsenio Hall to producing her. If you listen to her early solo records, even now she goes across the board. But during that time, that time period, she was always a person I looked up to, because you didn't have a whole lot of drummers or musicians that said, okay, they would be on a Michael Brecker record, but at the same time, their records will have R&B influences, or, yeah. So
Wow.
that's it in a nutshell.
You're so humble about the process. I just have one question about networking, and here's the question. So, like, a musical director friend of mine told me one time, and I'm always intrigued by the path. Gosh, time's going by so quick. But I'm just intrigued by the path. So, like, when you're doing these gigs and this is all happening, like, when they had that conversation with Cassandra's musical director,
Yeah.
I guess what I'm getting at, my musical director friend of mine said to me one time, if people know that I'm the MD for this show or this gig or this artist, and I'm playing with you, don't say, do I need a drummer? Like, everyone knows. So, like, you're like, the networking thing isn't that, right? It's like, you're just being there in the moment.
Well, you know what the networking is? The networking is, so I give you, okay, I give you one more example. So I remember hanging out with a buddy of mine, Cedric Mitchell. He was about to do some gigs with Kenny Garrett.
Mm-hmm.
And so I happened to go to rehearsal. And I'm thinking, my hero, Jeff Tane Watts, was in the band. He didn't make didn't make the rehearsal. Was it Michiko Studios? Yeah. And so they didn't have a drummer. And Kenny Garrett was just like, hey man, you want to play the drums? And I'm like, oh crap. But this is the deal. Before I ever played with Kenny Garrett, I knew his music. Know how I knew his music? I went to all his concerts. I got bootleg tapes for days. I bootlegged everything, as well as his records, everything. And so if you want to play with somebody, first thing is to know their music. Mm-hmm. So that was the first time I played with Kenny Garrett at that rehearsal. Did I get the gig after that? No. But as time passed by, when it was time for a drummer, he thought about me. So this is the other side of that. Your biggest way of networking in the music business, yeah, you can hang out. I know people that hang out that's everywhere. But this is the deal. They're known for strictly that, hanging out everywhere. Your biggest way of getting a gig or with anybody is recommendation. Every gig that I've got was through word of mouth and recommendation. If you, like, for instance, I received some phone calls out the clear blue. Like, I give you an example. I give you the examples. Okay. One of the major gigs. Okay. One came, the Yellowjackets. So that was, to me, that was a special moment. And I'll give you that story real quick. So basically at the time, there was a serious transition in my life. Remember, I told you I was a heavy weed drinking smoker. That was me. But during that time, there was a transition in which my life got dedicated back to the Lord as a Christian. And during that time, I remember the minister, actually it was my brother. I went back home to St. Louis. I went back home to St. Louis to visit. And during that time, my brother was led to speak into my life. And it was just that God showed him that, the things that I was about to be blessed, and just things were about to certain things were about to take place in my life. I didn't think nothing about it. I just knew that I needed to change. And so out of that moment, I remember I was fasting along with my family's church in St. Louis at home. And during this time, I was back in New York. Out the clear blue, I kid you not, I received a phone call from Russell Ferrante, Jimmy Haslip, and Bob Mentzer and management, who are all members, the members of the Yellowjackets. And this is the deal. They didn't ask me to audition. They said, hey, Marcus, the audition is this. We have some gigs. I'm like, oh, crap. So the audition was to it was a workshop at Berklee School of Music. And then we were playing 3 or 4 nights at Scullers in Boston. But how did that happen? How did they hear about Marcus? Shout out to a great buddy of mine that used to be at Yamaha Drums. Again, there it is. Bob was at IAJE, and he asked my drum endorser, do you have any drummers that you recommend? I don't know what made them think of me out the top of his head.
Who was it? Yeah, who was it?
At the top, you know who it was? Joe Testa. You know, everybody know Joe. Yeah.
A friend of mine. Yes.
Yeah.
Shout out to Joe, man.
Yeah. Shout out to Joe. Out of so it was Joe. So Joe recommended my name amongst some of the greatest musicians in the world, greatest drummers in the world.
Wow.
Was I better than those drummers? No. You know, but I end up making some gigs, and this is what I did. Russell sent me the music, sent me the tape, and man, I shedded that forever. And my roommate was a great reader, trombone player. I was like, man, come help me with these rhythms. And man, that was how that all happened. I was maybe in my early 20s and did the audition, which was I think I just finished college not too long ago. And, you know, I was playing with Kenny Garrett at the time. And so that's how that happened. But during that time also, recommendation.
Yeah.
I toured with two different bands of John Schofield. His Uber Jam band that the great, amazing Adam Deitch recorded albums and toured with, and then his Straight Ahead group. Recommendation. All the gigs is recommendation.
When you were in the Yellowjackets, you know, obviously you're their drummer for such a long period of time. It was your voice in the band. But at first, I know you said you listened to them when you were younger. Did you feel pressure, like, you know, at all, like being in there after Will, or was it kind of just, I'm going to be myself, and they were welcoming to it kind of thing?
You know what I did? And I have to say this, special shout out to the amazing Peter Erskine, because Peter, and I probably don't say this too much, but Peter to me was the filter that sort of took the punches for me. And that's what I mean when I say that. Peter came right after Will Kennedy. So you know what it's like? It's almost like, you know, Will has been in that band for all those years. And so a person sonically get accustomed to a sound. Yes. First of all, let me tell you how amazing, I have to say this, how amazing Peter Erskine is. When Peter Erskine joined the band, the Yellowjackets music is not easy. It's like it takes some preparation.
Yeah.
In learning that music. Peter Erskine first gig again, was at an IAJE. I wasn't there. I just heard about this. He literally showed up and sight read the whole gig.
Wow.
That's all I got to say, Peter Erskine. And so Peter Erskine was the person in between, because he's, you know, Peter Erskine is unbelievable, his history. And so he was the drummer in between me, and then I came and joined the band after that.
Okay.
And so for what I have to say is that I have to give a special shout out to him, and Will is my big bro as well. And so, you know, those guys are like, you know, people that I look up to, man. So it's like, for me to feel the pressure, I mean, it ain't about me ever being better than Will Kennedy, but what I can do is to do my best to study his parts, to try to say, okay, or Peter's parts, to say, hey, how can I make the guys feel like they've been playing with me all these years? Yeah. And the best way to do it is to learn how to understand what it means to have chemistry.
Right.
And that's what it was about to me. And then I want to add this one thing. When somebody sends you the music, most bands don't want to show up for you to rehearse. And when I say rehearse means, hey man, catch these hits right here. Hey man, let's reverse that part so you can get these hits. No. When you have been playing, this is the thing, when you have been touring for years, not just years, or you didn't have a working band and they're making a transition, it's strictly that word, transition. Transition means that you show up to the gig and you know the music inside out. And saying, therefore, when they start talking to you, they start talking to you in musical terms that you already know the music, that they talk to you in terms like, okay, right here, we like it a little soft right here, because it's about the chemistry. You want to show up and start creating a chemistry. A chemistry can't be created if you don't know the plays. I'm a sports guy. So if you don't know the music plays, you don't know the offense, you don't know the defense. What kind of chemistry are we going to have if you don't know the plays, if you don't know the music?
Oh, man.
And that's my motto in everything, you know, that I take. Yeah,
man, this is beautiful. Marcus, we could go on all day, but we don't have all day.
Okay, go ahead.
So let's talk about Now you left one of the biggest jazz acts in the world, and
Yeah.
now have your own the Baylor project, which you're working on now, and not just playing drums, but fully involved with you and your wife on every level of the group, Grammy nominated. So tell me how you made the transition. You left Yellowjackets, and I guess now this is
Yeah.
your focus, right? So
Yeah. And so what ended up happening is that when I left the Yellowjackets, I took some time off and I just started getting into producing, heavy producing.
mhm,
And that was a school within itself because my wife history, she used to be a part of an R&B group called Jeanne, which they were a platinum selling group. And so my wife has written for Mary J. Blige, movie soundtracks. I caught it, collaborated with, some of, they were a serious trailblazer of the 90s, neo soul, that whole 9 yards. And so during that time, I would go to meetings with my wife, and it would be more on the R&B side, and and the group was really her group was really successful.
right,
And so it was a time where we did a few solo projects together with her, produced a solo project together with her. And so during that time, when I stopped playing with the Yellowjackets, I started getting heavy into producing. But this was the deal. I didn't want to be that whack husband that get a chance to produce, because that's my wife, because she was working with some amazing hit maker producers.
right.
And so through that, I would just go sit. This is the thing. I would sit and watch. I would sit and watch. And then one day the producer said, "Hey, Marcus, you should bring some music over here." I was like, really? I was excited. I went home. I know we don't got that much time. I went home and started producing. And my wife, we went to the studio, and she told me before, "Hun, that's pretty busy. Like, that's a lot going on." And I was like, "No, take it over." We went over there, and the producer was like, "Man, you got pretty happy on them drums, huh?" And so I took the music back, took it back home, worked on something else, and I brought something else back. And he was like, "Yo, this is really good." And then I started we kept writing, my wife and I kept writing together and bringing music tracks because they would write together. And
Right.
from there, that started cultivating my sound. That was like a school that cultivated our sound, my wife and I. And so he said, "Man, this stuff is just as good as everything we have." And so through that really helped me sharpen my producer tools on production.
Right.
So through that whole process of taking meetings with labels and all that, she was like, my wife was a jazz major in college. She was known for doing jazz gigs during her time, but Jeanne just happened to put out a record, and it took over went through the next 10 years of her life, which was an amazing experience.
Yeah.
But during this time, we came through the crossroads, and we were like, man, she always told me, "I want to do a jazz record." And man, she sang on some Yellowjacket stuff, guest appeared too with Marcus Miller, all that, did some things. But we decided, I said, man, one day I took a long showers. You got to hear her story. And it came to me, it was just like, man, we should start a band called the Baylor Project, where I can express myself, because during that time I wasn't playing that much. We never really did a whole lot of gigs together. We did some stuff. And years ago, a guy at EMI Music said, "Man, you guys should do a thing." And a radio promoter told us that too. That was years ago. And so around 2015 or 14, we decided to do the Baylor Project. Of course, my wife said, she was like, "Man, that's a dumb idea. It don't make any sense. You featured on drums and me singing." I was like, "No, I got it." So we started that, and we went into the studio. We started getting music together, and man, we had this body of work. And so what ended up happening is, and so I have to tell somebody, this is the other side. It ties in.
Yeah.
At the time, I told my wife, we need the blessing of the teacher, Buster Williams. We're not going to just get out here and just, people would think of you, "Oh, you're this R&B singer. Now you want to sing jazz and, sing jazz and this and that." And, but I said, "You need to be Buster. I want him to hear you." I knew she had the talent, the gift, but he really, I told, jazz is different. Jazz is it ain't about a 2-song demo. Jazz is about, hey, they hear you, they're going to ask you to sing on the spot. If people love you, they could take you out on the road next week. Long story short, met Buster, and he heard my wife sing, and he dug her. 2 weeks later, he give her a call. "Hey, would you like to do some gigs with me to be she was basically like a feature in his band.
Mm.
And it was a Smoke Jazz Club for the weekend. And long story short, everything went really well. And the club owner asked, he was like, hey, would you like to come back and do a gig? And during this time, we were totally dismantling our just history. We just said we're gonna start from scratch. Well,
Right.
I tried to keep with mine because I was like, okay, let me call some jazz clubs to see if we can get a gig. It was crickets. I couldn't get one gig, not one. And then so the club owner asked for Gene and Smoke. I'm like, man, I've been in this jazz world for. I'm like, are you serious? And then I had to get out of my feelings. And what was crazy is this: what we knew, that was it was October something that we did our first gig. Now this is the business side. You know, we end up doing Smoke. We end up doing our first gig at Smoke, and we invited everybody we knew. The first set was a cool crowd. The last two sets were jumping. And out of that, we said, hey, we want to pack this out. You got to have a strategy because you want to be invited back. And so after that, we end up doing a 2-month, we would do twice a month residency that lasted like 8 or 9 months. But that's a whole nother conversation because it was like, you know, it was strategic in terms of building the brand of the Baylor Project. Smoke seats about 50 people, and we do 3 sets. And out of that, that led to us headlining on the weekend because we would do Thursdays. Out of that led to doing a gig at Blue Note, and then that led to us doing something at Winter Jazz Fest, and that we headlined at like a few festival in Europe, 2 festivals in Europe, and this was before we ever had a record out, and we was managing ourselves, no booking agent. So what I'm saying is, at the end of the day, whether you have a band, whether you're a musician, recommendation and word of mouth is your best business card that you will ever have. Even to this day, Buster Williams, the late, Gene has did gigs and got recommended. Myself, same thing. It's our recommendation.
Yeah. You now the position you're in where you guys are working on a new record and you're hands-on with everything. Do you enjoy do you enjoy the business side of running the ship, like the product, not just the production, but the, planning the cycle and the promotion and all this stuff? It sounds like you're pretty engaged with all of it. Like, very.
The answer is yes. Oh, go ahead. Finish. Go ahead.
Yeah.
The answer is yes and no. Yes, the music is the easy part. When I say the easy part, it's the easy part because it's the fun part. And and these things came out of not necessarily saying that, okay, I want to be independent, this and that. Our label, we have a label called Be a Light Music. And so that came out of a necessity to put out our music. I met with labels, and that's the thing. Now they circle back to me loving all music, because at the time, I remember when we completed our record, The Journey, I remember a label said, hey man, your music all over the place. And I said, actually, yeah, it is, because we're like musical iPods. My wife and I, we're heavy into straight ahead. We heavy into R&B. We heavy into gospel. We heavy into all these components make up who we are. And it tells our story. If that's what my story is, that's my story.
Yeah.
So we just decided to say, hey, we're going to drop this. Shout out to Lydia Liebman, an amazing publicist. We set out a plan. We rocked it. And it took, it led us to Nothing's Guaranteed, but we were blessed to get nominated for 2 Grammys off that record, the All Over the Place album.
All right.
So, I mean, that's just the music that I always, create, that's just who I am.
Yeah.
And so as far as the business side, like my wife, from her experience, like if you look at our photo shoots, that's her. I'm totally like, you should just show me where to go. We're going to get the stylist. I get my clothes together. You get yours. Like, it's because it's a whole thing. When I was in other bands, we show up and do a photo shoot. I'm like, yo, we'd be done with this in about an hour and a half, 2 hours. Cool, we out. No, my wife photo shoots, when we do photo shoots, got a makeup artist. Man, that's like a whole 8-day. But I have to tell you, when the photos get done, the professional, the brand, and all those things, videos, that's my wife. Right? The treatments, my wife. She's did some of the greatest videos, which were trailblazers of our time in terms of the look and all those things. There's her lane. Music is both of us. Another thing, a lot of people didn't know, like there's a discovery. we were working on horn parts. We got a new record, by the way, that's coming out in 2021 called Generations. We're working on. Look out for that.
And
The thing about it is with that, I was going to talk about that, is that, like, for instance, my wife, like, we were working on horn parts, and it was just like, man, we're not getting what it is we want. I said, Gene, you do harmonies all the time. You love background arrangement. I said, sing what you want to hear behind you. My wife writes horn parts that way.
oh wow.
So she writes horn parts, and and then notate them, and that's that. But she uses her voice. So I'm just saying that to say, we were really a team. We have certain lanes, and that we both work in together, and it just works out that way.
Yeah. It sounds great. The thing you said brand before, and then Gene's like really like on top of the image. It sounds like you guys have a nice like complementary things that you're both good at,
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think the thing about it is, I think all artists have to figure out what their plan and where they want to go. What is the end goal?
Right.
That's what I would say. You have to set goals, like, for instance, you just have to be intentional with everything you do.
Right.
That's the way I look at it. Yeah.
And people can find out. I put up the site, the BaylorProject.com.
Yeah.
Go there and find out. And then hopefully, I'm assuming once we get back to whatever the world's going to look like when this pandemic is over, you guys are going to go out and play. And
yeah. And I have to tell them this: if you want our last record, The Journey, that's a whole nother conversation. But you can go. You can buy it on all download sites. You got to hear the word that I said. Buy it. We didn't stream The Journey at all. Now, this single that we put out during the pandemic called Sit On Down, you can stream that all day. But I'll just say this. The reason why we didn't stream the record is because there was a strategic plan that we needed those album sales. And that's a whole nother conversation. But with that being said, as independent artists, I mean, maybe if I was in a label system, I may consider it, because maybe the marketing will be there, quote unquote, playlists and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But for us, buying the records has enabled us for us to be able to record this second album. And we did an Indiegogo campaign too, which that's a whole nother conversation. We did it for the money, to try to get money to make the record, but then that was one of the world's greatest marketing campaigns that went viral internationally, that got the word out about our band. There are things that happen in your life and your career that happens that you never planned, that you didn't never think. And that was one of them.
Wow. Yeah, we could have a whole nother session just talking about all the business stuff and all the different,
I'll come back anytime.
I'm going to take you up on that. We got a lot more to cover. I was going to ask you about, but can I keep you a couple more minutes?
Man, I'm good. We go as long as I'm fine. I'm fine.
Our friend Andy Weiss has been commenting a bunch of nice things, but he's given me a nice segue here. Still playing the Rocktagon. We've been given a platform by Sabian, of course, and you're a proud Sabian player. So
shout out to Sabian.
Tell me what sounds you're using now. What are you liking? What are you using with the Baylor project? And interesting. I see some symbols behind you there. I don't know if those are the ones.
I might have. So you know what? That's funny that you brought up the Rocktagon. I might have to bring that back out. I haven't probably played that. Man, I haven't played that symbol in years. But right now in the studio that's here, I have the Big Ugly Ride, which is like a 22-inch. These are like two ozones, two AAX ozones. These are like 220s. And everything I do, that's a major part of my sound. I love rivets and everything. Yeah, I even got some hi-hats with rivets in them. But those are the artisans over there. But there are things that I use in the studio and live. But one hi-hats that I play all the time, that I had since Kenny Garrett, that I haven't got away from, the HH Groove hi-hats. I use those. I even use the let's see, this guy over the chopper. I got the chopper.
That's a pretty big one.
Yeah, this is a 12-inch. I also have a 10-inch one too.
Oh, cool. Are you a big hats kind of guy, or what? You 14s or bigger?
I'm all over the place. One thing about, like, when I'm working on records, and that's another thing I have to give you this nugget. So when I'm working on records, right? I remember I did a straight ahead jazz record. The producer was like, you know, a lot of times, you have where pretty much like on bebop records, you just show up with the kid, and that's the kid and the two cymbals, and that's that, and which is awesome, classic records.
Right.
But for me as a, I hear things as a producer.
Right.
So when I show up to the studio, so this goes back to Dougal Chancellor. And Dougal Chancellor picked me up one time. I was playing with Cassandra Wilson. He picked me up and I went to a studio session. I was celebrating Basie or editing for George Duke session. Literally recording one song, I think. For one song, I noticed that when he brings his rig, he brought a rig. His what you call it? The person at the cart. What's the
cartage or roadie or something?
Yeah, roadie. Brought a rig, not a drum set, a rig. And I was like, dang. He showed me the snare drum that he used on was it Billie Jean? And I just saw this huge rig. And it taught me something. I was like, man. So when I started doing sessions, so I brought all these drums. I brought one 18-inch kick, but I got a whole lot of assorted snares, cymbals. I bring all these different sounds with me. And when I set up, the guy was like, man, you gonna use all this? Like, really? You know, and so when we finished that session, he said, man, I would have never known that you would have played all this stuff. Like just how, because what I do is I treat a song. I don't treat a record. I treat a song. So each song, there's a record called that I played on by an amazing pianist named Christian Sands, his debut album that I played on. Same thing with the Yellowjackets. I don't use the same snare drum on every song. You know, so sometimes I may have, you know, like over there, that's a 14, maybe that might be like it's a really deep custom made snare. Shout out to Poogie Bell. He had that made for me. I think Poogie from Yamaha. So it's the same thing with cymbals. I don't use this same, like on gigs, yes, but on studio sessions, man, I have it's a whole thing that I bring out, you know, and that's how I hear, you know, that's just how I hear music. I hear it as, you know, treatments, you know, yeah. So, but I think, did he cut out? Are you still there? But any case, well, I keep talking until he jumps back in. Probably his connection went down. But yes, let me see. What else? See if there's any questions here. Oh, he asked me about the Lakers. Yes. Let me see. Oh, took your daughter to see. What up, Andy? To see the Yellowjackets at Yoshi's. Oh man, yes, that was an amazing experience. Yes. Shout out to you, Keith. What up, Courtney, my cousin in the military doing your thing. Claude, hey man. No, thank you for Jazz Sawyer, my bro. Oh man, thank you. Oh, what up, Mark? Ryan. Oh man, some beautiful people on here. Yeah. Yeah. So so if you got shoot me, what up, Earl? Shoot me some questions if you have them. And then also I got an Instagram over here too. Let me see who over here. Who over here? Oh man, I see a few of my bros in here. But so this is it's a pleasure to be live with Sabian, with Bob. I mean, man, I've been with Sabian. Let me see how many years I've been with Sabian. That was one of my first endorsements, probably since 1990, probably 98. And so for those, oh yeah, I'm gonna answer that question too, Earl. For those that want to inquire about being endorsed, that stuff, it comes through recommendations too, you know, and that's how it happened for me with Sabian as well. Recommendation, you know. You asked what's my basic drum setup? Okay, I see approach to teaching. Okay, I'm gonna answer Earl's question first. So Earl, you say what's my basic approach to my basic setup? I don't really have one. It depends on what music I'm playing based off the sound. If it's groove, well, I'll tell you this. If I'm grooving, I'm always a 20-inch kick guy. If I'm straight ahead, it's an 18-inch. But everything else, you know, I is based off the sound. But basically like a 10, 12, 14, 16 would be my times. And somebody asks, what's my approach to teaching? My approach to teaching is I don't have a standard thing. When I hear somebody play, I just give my observation on what you can improve on. I like to do more teaching that deals with concepts. Far as music reading, I would probably recommend you to go to a particular person to do that. What else did you ask? Okay. How can you perfect your chops? So my question to you, Isaac, is when you say perfect your chops, I need to know what you mean, because chops, if you're talking about, okay, how can I solo and get speed? I understand that. Of course, rudiments, all that stuff is important. Practicing on a pillow, slow, intonation. But I would love to pick your brain about music. So, because it has to be in relation to music to me. When I think about chops, it has to, like, I don't necessarily sit down and say, when I practice technical things, it's about me being able to articulate my ideas in the moment. So sometimes that takes speed, or that may take certain things. So it's just like a basketball player. I feel like if I'm doing certain drills, running drills, and I'm shooting a shot off one leg, then I feel like that's a drill that I'm working on. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that particular drill I'm going to do on the court. So that particular chop doesn't mean that I'm going to play on the gig, but it's about facility to me. So I just want to make sure, like I want to be able to lead drums with my left hand. I want to be able to react with my right hand. As a righty, you're used to reacting with your right hand first. But for me, if something comes at me, zoom, so I can do that with my left hand if I need to. So that's what chops is to me. One aspect of chops. And somebody asked me, "Oh, Joe, you back?"
Yeah, I'm back. You don't need me apparently, but I'm back.
Oh, I'm good to go. I said, let me ad lib. It said,
I put this one on the screen. I don't know. Did you answer? Are you doing any online teaching right now? Taking any students?
I haven't. Maybe at some point I may need to. I haven't, just based off being busy with the label stuff and running a record label and, working on our new record. But maybe at some point I will. I mean, you can hit me up on Facebook, inbox me, whatever. Maybe at some point.
Cool. We had some of our members from Carlo from Italy.
Yeah.
Had people from all over the world, of course, all over the U.S. Somebody said, whatever I do, don't ask you about the Lakers.
Oh, well, you can't ask about that. I'm a LeBron James fan. So I'm drafted into, I was a Lakers fan growing up with Magic Johnson, but I switched that to MJ. But now we're back. The Lakers, we're back. So we won last night. I don't need to say anything about that. What the series, we're up 3-1, and that's that.
that was it. All right. Well, Marcus, this is great. Thanks for giving. Sorry about the glitch there.
You're good. Should I ask some? I can answer some more questions.
Yeah, let's see what. Let's see. Let's take a couple more real quick. I got to scroll back. I have to scroll back up to see what else we had.
I see one.
Did you take this one? What's your basic?
Yeah, I got that one. What about how do you balance pocket versus ad-libbing?
Oh, yeah. That's great. Let me see.
That's a good question. How do you balance pocket? Well, this is the thing. Again, it boils down to, it ain't that I necessarily think about if I'm chopping too much, or it ain't necessarily a balance to me, because when I look at the balance is that once you know the music, it's about servicing the song. And if you service that particular song, what is the goal of the song in terms of understanding the language of the song? And that dictates to you, like if I'm playing a certain song, like I know that, okay, if I got a bridge section, I know, okay, the verse, I may be on a, backbeat snare, but I may be on a rim or, side stick. But then I know, hey, when I get to the bridge, okay, I got to do a fill to lead you into the next section. But sometimes that next section, if it need a lift, I might go from the hi-hat to the ride cymbal. So with that being said, chops for me are based off the interaction of everything that is going on. So if I feel like something is high energy, where it's like a tag, like so I may feel like it's based off of expression, not based off I can open up right here. So it's like because you hear the bass, he may be filling in some things. So it's like understanding the scope of a whole song and understanding the balance. So to answer your question, I think it's about servicing the song. It ain't about, man, stay in the pocket. People think being in the pocket means to play straight. I don't believe that. The pocket is that it feels good. Whatever you're doing, if people still doing this, like put it like this, Chris Dave, I use him as an example. I'm picking on him today. He plays some of the most amazing pockets, but God, sit down and try to play Chris Dave's pockets. Some of the most intricate madness that you ever will ever try to do.
Right.
Because he may be doing something on a hi-hat that's crazy. He may be doing something with the right hand that's crazy and where the kick is dropping, but you still doing like this. You still nodding your head. And he might be playing behind the beat on a snare. And it's just like, but you still nodding your head. So it just has to, it's a relation. Gad can open up. I mean, it just has to, Dennis, it's all relation to the music.
It's interesting watching you on video with Gene, of course, with other artists too, but especially with Gene, like I think drummers forget sometimes they're watching, they might watch a video of a drummer, but they're not watch what the drummer is, how he's communicating with the singer or the bass player. Like you have a connection with the other people on stage. So you know when there's the space for you to do something,
right?
Or like if you're not locked into that communication, you won't know when you might be stepping on somebody if you play more notes or whatever, right?
Yeah. I mean, like for instance, when we started the Baylor project, one of the first conversations that I had with my wife, I told her, I said, this is the deal. The Baylor project is a band, and she loved it. It's a band concept. It's not going to be that, okay, I'm going into my singer's bag. I don't have a singer's bag. I'm going to play behind you the same way I play behind Kenny Garrett, or the same way I'm playing in the Yellowjackets or anywhere else. I'm reacting to music. I'm not reacting to, okay, this is the forefront person. So I react to music. And so with that being said, I feel like, okay, you're in this particular band, you're an instrumentalist as well. So you're going to get that same push because we all got to push each other and grow. So there are certain things that she would do that pushes me. And push doesn't mean volume, doesn't mean loud. It could be a subtlety. And so those are important. And that was one of those things, like no different than, when I'm playing in the Jackets and, in other situations. So that's the way my approach to, the way I look at playing in bands with what people would say singers. And believe it or not, singers actually love that energy, is that you're sensitive to, like you should be sensitive to a horn player or anybody that's soloing or whatever, or just listen, or if it's just a group thing, you should all be listening the same way intensely, with the same intensity.
Yeah. It's especially now since we can't have it. I just we were talking yesterday, I played a couple gigs. It's like, it's a human experience. It's like you're there, and I think one of the coolest things that I've learned or been inspired by today is what you said about just, you play the music that you play. You don't worry about what genre it is. It's so funny. You talked about the labels, the labels struggle because everything needs to go in a certain basket. Like it needs, and you don't worry about that. And you're just Marcus Baylor, and that's what the music is. And I find that really inspiring.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like the connection to music in general, I feel like the connection to music, man, people can feel your heart. A great song is a great song, whether it's instrumental or whether it has lyrics, whatever you want to call it. You want to call it a rock or whatever. If you hear Sly and the Family Stone, which you can hear rock influences or whatever it is, man, it's a great song, but that's totally different from, I mean, his voice. I'm gonna say his voice and what he's been blessed to have is totally different from the average white band. But that's but at the end of the day, what do they have in common? Great music and great songs. Yeah. And what is the difference? The difference of those bands of each band of Earth, Wind and Fire or anybody, or Miles Davis or anybody, is that your voice and your tone is what makes you different. But as far as there's no difference between good music, it's either good music or it's not. It's not a genre. But I understand you have to sell a product. It's a business. And the reason why they probably created genres, it's like when you put it like this, so I give you one quick example. So I pretty much can go in almost, if I check it out, or if I don't know it, I'm gonna work on learning the language. There's a lot of different spaces that I can go in as a drummer, not from an egotistical standpoint, but it's just from a standpoint of I just love all these different styles of music. But from a marketing standpoint, well, not even marketing. I got myself, I started off in jazz. That's where I built my name. But outside of that, that's where my foundation was in terms of my career. Mm. But out of that career came, okay, I played on Anita Baker record. I played on a rock record. I played on these different things. So the way people look at these genres and all that stuff, I get it, because you have to try to streamline something. It's almost like somebody tells an artist. People love to say this. This is another marketing thing. They say, hey, man, you could be independent. Only thing you need is the internet. You got Facebook. Yo, do you know Facebook got 1 billion people, and social internet is billions and billions of people? If you don't streamline that thing to say, hey, just because I play music, put it like this. If I want to market me playing drums, I don't necessarily need to probably start off by marketing myself to everybody that loves music. No, you market yourself to people that love drummers first. Mm-hmm. And then that will lead you to, you know, you have to start somewhere and bridge it out. Do I believe those things are necessarily right? I'm not saying that. So that's how they think with genres. But for me, I don't think that way at all.
Yeah.
So that was just analogy on why they probably think the way they do.
Yeah. Well, and you have to understand that. So
yeah.
Well, Marcus, I want to say thanks, man. This has been such a great time. You're such a gentleman and brilliant musician, and so enlightening to hear you speak. And thank you for giving us your wisdom and your time today.
Man, thank you, Joe, man. It was such a pleasure, man. And just love to you, and just, you know, everybody at Sabian, and just everybody just be, you know, safe during this time. And, you know, if you get a moment, check out a song. It just hit me. Be safe, wear your mask. And we had a song called Sit On Down, which at the time we created this song to encourage people at the time that stay in the house during this pandemic. But now we can get out and about a little bit, but just be safe in that. And man, keep creating. This is, you know, this is our outlet as creators. So man, just keep leaning towards that. And blessings and prayers to everybody.
Thank you, Mark. Great words of wisdom. And everybody watched it on Dead. If you haven't watched and checked out the song and the video, it's really great. The Baylor Project, be sure you go to the site. Keep abreast of what Marcus is doing. And as always, I will be back next week. Dom will be back on Thursday. I'll be back Friday. My guest next Friday will be Jim Riley. So Jim's got some cool projects. And we'll see you then. Everybody have a safe, great weekend. Marcus, thank you again. Bye-bye, everybody.
Take care.